I want them to stand on our shoulders and to be able to move forward and compete in a global world. And I expect inclusivity from our schools. I expect our schools to be adaptable to helping kids that are in different situations with different needs. One of my sons has an IEP, an individualized learning plan. And I really appreciate the special education teachers who work with him on his reading. That's critical, and it's something I do expect from our schools. You know, we have kids all across the spectrum with many different needs and many with different gifts, and we need to be able to work with all of them. And I expect equal treatment for our students and our families so that they all know that they're welcomed and valuable in our schools. Now, as a parent, I know I have a role too, right? I can't just put this on the schools and expect them to do everything and not have anything that I do too. So I know my role is to make sure that my kids are ready to learn, that they're well rested, you know, I have to enforce that bedtime, and that they're fed and that they have their supplies, they're ready to go. It's my job to communicate with teachers too, if they know that we have challenges at home, or if I'm seeing really good successes. And it's my job to provide context and to help with homework and assignments. You know, schools can give the information, but we as families need to give the context of our worldview, our perspectives, the values and the morals that we hold. And I know my job is to love them and to let them know that mistakes are how we learn. They are critical to the process, and we need to celebrate them, embrace them, and then learn from them. And it's also my job to push them to do better, just like my parents did for me. A lot of people have asked me, well, how does your role as a parent translate to a role as a leader and as somebody in government? And I want to say that public school is fundamental to a thriving democracy. An inclusive and high quality education system is an investment. When schools are strong, we see growth in the surrounding areas. Businesses want to build nearby, people move into the area, and poverty rates drop. Schools could be providing good, well-paying jobs for caring people. You know, we see entire towns built around universities. And our local K through 12 schools have that potential too. What has happened in Arizona, though, is a chronic underfunding of public schools that has broken our system down. And then those same people who have caused the problem point and they say, oh, look how bad it is. We need to pull our kids out. You know, we need to take our money out and build these private institutions with our public dollars. It's only fair that we get a choice, right? But that choice doesn't exist for everyone. Not everybody can take the time to take their kid to a public school. Not everybody has the time to do the research. And for the kids and the families who need it the most, it's not really a choice. And those same critics in the state legislature have stopped bills year after year that would provide the same level of oversight on our tax dollars for our charter schools that are receiving public funding as for our traditional public schools. You know, a charter school could be doing a great job of serving students, and those charter schools will be just fine with more oversight. But we also know that there is self-dealing and fraud happening in the charter system. And those schools have some powerful and deep pockets behind them. They're invested in keeping it that way. I am running to shine a light in those dark corners. I want to bring transparency and accountability to the charter school system and to fix the funding for our traditional public schools. Now that's a little bit about me and what I stand for. And I have the pleasure today of introducing our special guest. Kiana Maria Sears is a compassionate community advocate whose life purpose is to use her voice to inspire and empower all communities, especially communities of color and minority groups, to help them participate in all aspects of governance. Kiana Maria was born to a Vietnam veteran father and a career civil servant mother, which molded her passion to honor the sacrifices of those who have served for her liberties, as well as to do her part to serve our most vulnerable citizens, our children, our future servant leaders. For the past 25 years, Kiana Maria has lived in Mesa, Arizona, has been engaged Arizona State University Sun Devil as a double alum. She has served a 4-year term on the Mesa Public Schools Governing Board as the board clerk, the largest governing board in the state of Arizona. Her platform is simple. Every single child deserves an opportunity to learn and access to an education. And she believes in honoring and respecting teachers and the teacher's profession.
Thank you so much. It is my honor and pleasure that you would take your Saturday morning to be with us, to join us, to ask questions, because I know we are a caring community that's working really hard to ensure that public education is strong, ready, and set here in Arizona. I heard Suzanne say that about her children and I really love that ready, set, go. In that, because I see the green light, and I believe that being very positive and knowing that we are working toward that green light. So thank you for having me, Suzanne, and I look forward to today's town hall.
Absolutely. And then Tanya, I think we're ready to take some questions. But I do want to take a point of privilege and ask Kiana kind of the first question. Mm-hmm. I watched the last board meeting, all like 5.5 hours of it until late in the night. And you're really working with a lot of difficult issues.
Yeah. I'm leaving.
And I know that some of them are decisions that the board has to make, but there are also things that are happening because the governor has mandated it, that we really don't have a choice but to comply with. And I'd like you to talk a little bit, because I know there's a lot of public discourse right now around what school boards are doing, but what is it that, where is that falling between what the governor is requiring to do versus what the school board is making choices on?
Oh, thank you. That is a great question, because it's the one that is at the root of the division between our community members and parents and educators and classified staff. And so it's basically has pitted those who serve our children in their homes versus those who serve our children in our schools. So the governor made the mandate that on August 17th, we have on-site supported care for children, not returning back to school, not any of those things, but actually having kids have an area in our public schools where they can come. Do you understand with that, all teachers in Arizona at the time that that mandate was set to occur, which was last Monday, we're still teaching remotely. So no teachers would be involved in the equation of bringing kids back to our schools. It would be our bus drivers, our custodial workers, any instructional aides who weren't helping with remote learning. So hence not creating an ideal situation for support of learning, because the roles of most of the employees who were there with the children weren't people who actually do the education and instruction. So if you were at a school and you're a student and you have problems or you don't understand something, the bus driver could be empathetic, but not necessarily know how to help you with instruction. And that mandate was made in a way, and I do want to first speak of Mesa Public Schools' role. Mesa Public Schools appealed to the governor's office for a reprieve from setting up on that exact date, because we were not prepared. Many school districts, we had to be prepared because that was a mandate, and we have already begun to purchase all of our PPE. So the money, there was money attached to that. And so basically there was there would be a penalty of $17 million if we didn't comply So that $17 million, which was already being spent, would be pulled from our district if we didn't comply in the nature that was set out. So it wasn't something that we thought was ideal, but we did the best we could with the staff that we had, and we over prepared for the number of students. Because the other thing is, we didn't know how many students were coming. We didn't know how many families would take the option, because it was an opt-in and all open. We did an open registration, but we also were required, if someone just showed up, to be prepared. So we over prepared, and it's kind of come and gone. And at this point, now we're back focusing on the opening of schools. But I think the greatest thing that mandate did, and some of the other things that's happening with school opening, is causing this conflict between distressed parents and our educators who are in our schools, which is certainly an absolutely unfair, not reasonable, and a great divide that shouldn't exist, because at the bottom line, both sides care about the exact same thing, the well-being of children.
Thank you so much, Kiana. I know on back to school night, right, where we got to meet the teacher, I was in my kids' classes with 20 other parents, and yeah, there was a lot of concern. I mean, as parents, sometimes we don't feel equal to the task of educating our kids, and we appreciate that teachers are real professionals doing this. So it is scary, and especially, I'm in a pretty ideal situation. I'm able to set up my kids with their 2 desks, and I work from home, so I've been able to support them. But I know that's not the case for everybody, and it's hard. But I've been so impressed by the teachers' compassion and resiliency, and their ability to kind of work through those technical problems. I know that the first week was really bumpy.
Yes.
But it got a lot better. I know my kids are learning, and I think safety is so important. And my kids are really learning that, sometimes civic duty takes sacrifice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I appreciate too that you're trying to put together a plan to return safely, because for so many families, this is really a struggle, and taking that into account too.
I hear the struggle, and the one thing that I'm happy you brought to the table was building resiliency. One of the things that I talked to you, and there's our organization that's called Resilient Me, that helps foster care youth, because we do know that in the foster care system, the greatest threat to the young adult success is when they're aging out of the foster care system. So there's this organization. So when I've thought about this distressing, and I'm gonna call it a distressing time, I also think about the future leaders that we're building as they reach and they are persistent and build their resiliency. Because I'm being very honest, as I look at a lot of young adults, as I'm on ASU campus, there's some students who have had a privileged life and show up and are not very resilient. To just start at the university, I often have to actually do these many therapy sessions all along the way, because the student has had so many supports, so many helps. And I think as a Generation Xer, I often think about the things that we have done, because I have a 26-year-old and a 24-year-old, to help our children be successful, but sometimes not being mindful to let them struggle and develop that grit. Because grit is one of those determinants of very successful people. So hence, I am mindful of areas and certain families that this is just totally not acceptable. It's not workable. It's something that they can't do. But I do know a lot of the parents that I hear, but some of the loudest voices, it's a kind of a challenge of the wills and grit, and do I have to spend these 3 hours with my child trying to do this thing that I never had to think about before. So I think it, poses a lot of different things, but also I always think as future Representative Hugs would say, I think future about the jobs of the future and what's going to happen. If they have not been created yet, and I think this is the first time in history that we are realizing that everything is on a pendulum swing and that we're going to do a hard pivot. And I think this particular situation has helped us see that this pivot, that we have to get our students ready when it comes to science and technology.
Yes, I'm loving this conversation and where it is going. We are getting questions from our guests. Kiana, I love that you mention jobs, future jobs, because we tend to focus on schools as something immediate, and part of this conversation is just sharing how important for the present and for the future, right? For the immediate future, for the generation of kids who are growing it is. Okay, our first question is for both Suzanne and Kiana. And Sandy says, I appreciate the dialogue and decision to keep in-person teaching on hold for now. What is the next step? And are any youth and teachers in class right now, special ed, those of essential workers, etc.?
Okay, I'll jump in because for us, like what's happening on the ground and what's going on in school, I am there and in these very long meetings as you talked day and night. Matter of fact, I spoke to our superintendent this morning talking about COVID testing. So the first thing about the next steps. So after our meeting, there was an evaluation on Monday regarding the metrics. If you didn't watch, there was a huge conversation about benchmarks. What benchmarks we're using, what are we using for us deeming safe? Because that was the biggest thing. What is safe? Because we put something out that said we'll return when it's safe. So safe now is we're looking at the Maricopa County and Health Department data and dashboard. And so they have a dashboard that has a red, a yellow, and a green when it comes to what are the safe zones for us returning to school in person in some shape, form, or fashion. So the first step with returning to school is a modified in person, where it would be a select days and we would alternate. So that's what would allow our 10 students in a classroom versus 30. So we're looking 10 versus 12 students, because unfortunately our schools and our classrooms are much larger than that. Some nearing 30 students in a classroom when it comes to elementary. So we that approach will help us have less students in a class. So what does that look like in the future? So based on the trend that we're seeing in Mesa and the zip codes that make up Mesa and the 5 legislative districts. So if you didn't know, Mesa is not the only school city in which Mesa public schools reside. We're in Chandler, we're in Apache Junction, we're even up to Scottsdale. We of course are in Mesa, in Gilbert, and some surrounding things. So that's LD 16, 17, 18, 25, and 26 are the boundaries part that we share here in Mesa Public Schools. So what's going to happen with that study is so far, if we stay on track, if we all do our parts, stay safe, wear our masks, continue to drive the numbers of positivity rate of COVID down, we are on track to open schools on September 14th in a modified version. So let me be clear about that. It won't be full school reopening. It would be a modified version that I talked about alternating days, and it kind of varies from, because we are unified elementary, junior high, and high school. It's going to look different in those three categories, but that is the plan. As far as special ed, the governor also made a mandate about special ed and a date to return to special ed teaching. So, and I think there was some confusion around that because it wasn't necessarily our school district saying, let's get special ed back up and in the classroom and going. There was also a mandate to have special ed services happening for our most vulnerable students. So with that, we also had a tooling and a tweaking of, it was open, special ed. So who's going back? Is it our younger special ed and developmental delayed young people? Is it older people? Because it was very much a mandate, but pretty much open to the nature of who needs to be serviced. And of course, we have different federal guidelines that we can't meet right now in terms of serving and specialized needs of children who are in special ed. So right now we don't have those children. They are being serviced remotely the best they can, but they're not on campus yet. And that return is one of the earliest returns, say if things go negatively and we can't open schools, where I know that this week there is a look at gradually getting special ed up and going in different units and different areas in our district. So special ed, very complex, very complicated, many needs, and again, no different than general population as to we have teachers who desperately want to come back and service students. We have teachers who are concerned because of some of the needs of the students. They can't protect themselves no matter what, because students don't have the ability to wear a mask. Neither do they have the ability to not touch and do all the things we know helps the spread. So that is another complication to actually try to weigh who wants to come back, who would rather be home. So I asked a question about employment, because as Tanya was saying, employment has now been a big thing with this whole discussion, is if teachers don't come back or if they're required to come back, or what's the constraint? Do we have teachers losing jobs? And I'm saying teachers a lot because the educators who are in our system make up the largest number, but do know our classified staff and our people who make up our bus drivers, our custodial, they've been working since we closed. It's been continual work for them because they've been repurposed in so many different areas, as you heard me talk about the plan to have on-site support. So they've been working, and I just kudos for all the things that they've done. And not only a kudos, but also being in my prayers, because we also have to look at exposure, direct exposure, and what's happening and all the things that they've done. So I'm gonna stop there for now and let Suzanne chime in.
Kiana,
Thank you.
thank you so much for just all of that information. You really are a wealth of knowledge. And one thing I want to take from what you were speaking about is that we need to really be directly advocating to our state leaders. That this isn't necessarily all at the school board level. While it's very important to stay involved, reach out, that we need to be sending letters to Doug Ducey and emailing and calling him and letting him know that, you know, some of these reopening procedures may not be ideal. You know, one of the things I took from that school board meeting is that our special ed kids often are our most medically fragile. And so to put them also back first doesn't make a lot of sense to me as a layman. But I understand too that right now they're getting no education, whereas other kids are doing distance learning. So it's a really hard situation for everybody. But I want everyone to know that your voice is important and that your thoughts should be shared with the governor's office. They need input from us. And that, you know, as we talk about these things, we all have a duty to speak up, because being quiet right now isn't serving anybody's good.
Yeah, I want to build up on that, Suzanne, because I'm getting questions from the Facebook chat and from the chat here on Zoom, and I find that many of these questions are related to each other. So trying to comprise them in the same narrative. And I think we're so lucky to have Kiana right now on the field right now. And then you on this analysis that you have been making of what could be better, right? So let's start from the beginning. Just for the people who didn't watch that conversation and who were not necessarily in context, because Judy's question has to do with it. Can you share, Suzanne, just a very brief summary of your conversation with the epidemiologist Eric Filmdank about COVID-19? And with that context, I have these questions. One, it says, I would like to know what efforts are being made or should be done to address the HVAC systems at school. And this is a question that is echoed both on Facebook and Zoom. And we will round it with Judy's question here on Zoom too, that says that now that there has been science evidence evidencing COVID-19 is airborne and that older children can be super spreaders, will Mesa Public Schools consider installations of technology that addresses all AC ventilation systems before expanding our own campus care centers? So just to summarize, Kiana has been talking right now. She shared, thank you, Kiana, for that, because I think we don't have all the clarity that we need regarding this topic. So thank you for sharing everything about the metrics. So what are the current metrics? What do we know about the metrics and how things should work here? Suzanne, would you like to take it?
Yes, thank you. So toward the end of July, I had a meeting with epidemiologist Dr. Eric Fingelding, and we'll go ahead and link his information in the chat, and we'll also post it on Facebook at some point. But he is on the federal task force that is dealing with COVID response. He's ranked #2 worldwide as far as COVID research right now. And he's out of the East Coast area, but I had met him last year at a leadership conference, and so I actually know him personally. And he agreed to do an hour conversation about public policy and the epidemic here in Arizona. And what we learned from that was that there's two different things going on. There's the science, and then there's a lot of health theater. So the science is showing us that this virus spreads very easily, and that it's in micro droplets that are in the air, and that 6 feet isn't enough. Right. What the 6 foot is for larger droplets, like if you cough or sneeze, and that's what people originally thought it was. And then those land on surfaces, and it's surface contact spreading. What we've found from the science since then is that's actually a very, very small percentage of how things spread. And it's pretty easy to take care of, right? We get our Lysol wipes and we wipe it down, or we cover with our elbow when we cough or sneeze. The problem with this virus, though, is it's also in the micro droplets that just come out every time you take a breath, every time you say a word, every time you sing a note, and in your daily lives. And that also, it's coming out in fecal matter, in public restrooms. And that when you flush a toilet, that puts a lot of stuff into the air. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to think about it. But from a public health standpoint, we have to. And I think as moms, we know it's a dirty job, but this is how we keep things clean and healthy. So after having that conversation with him, we said, you know, what is it we can do? How do you do it? And he said, really, it's ventilating spaces. It's getting air exchange, because the solution is dilution, right? When there's virus in the air, you have to dilute it by getting in good airflow. And one of the problems with HVAC systems right now is that they're just recycling the same air. So it's really concentrating it more than clearing it. Now there are solutions, but they are expensive. They require new HVAC systems or retrofitting with UV. And also in the bathrooms, we should be getting rid of those air dryers and putting toilet seat covers on the toilets. Basically, your seat cover is like a mask for your toilet. So ladies, if you've been harassing men, probably men, to close the lid all the time, you've been right. Please feel really justified in that, because that is actually a health and safety issue. And this is coming from an epidemiologist who is in the midst of this pandemic. He predicted it early, and sadly what he said was going to happen has happened. I'm so glad that we have the mask mandate now, because that mask mandate has been working. It's not statewide yet, but we have it at least for Maricopa County. So that is some of the information, though, that we got in that. And if you want to watch the entire discussion, it is available on my website at hugforhouse.com. I think we have it posted there. But if not, you can email and we'll make sure that you get the link.
It's on YouTube, but I will post it there. Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay. So thank you for that context, Suzanne. I'm trying to, so I have a lot of questions that are very focused on the moment, and we will address those questions. However, I would like to take a step back, because that was the whole reason why we planned this town hall. And when this town hall was planned in a Zoom call with Kiana and Suzanne. And when we started talking about education, what's important, I mean, we have known that education is super important, and it's a very relevant topic and issue in Arizona since forever. But the biggest controversy right now, the huge discussion going on is, should we go back online? Should we go back in person? And I liked it when Suzanne and Kiana said, hey, we are asking about the how without asking about the why. So what is education about? Why does it matter, right? Why is it important to think about in terms of what are our goals? And then when we have those goals clear and agreed upon, then we can start thinking about the how. Because everybody's, at some point as a parent and as someone who's watching this from outside, it looks like everybody's so worried about their kids missing, divisions this year. And I'd rather have my child tell the story of their life when they're 85 than to learn how to divide, right? So it's also a reflection about what is important. So before we continue with the questions, there are many questions about like the right now and the how. I have a question here. It says, it's a question from Stephanie, in a post-pandemic time, which this is interesting because when we think about the future, we can think about the present from a different perspective. In a post-pandemic time, how do you see schools implementing methods of instruction, uses of technology, flexibility in attendance methods, etc., that are being currently utilized? Will things return to how they were before, or should schools continue to develop virtual and digital instruction methods when they are no longer, quote unquote, necessary?
Suzanne, I would like to kind of bounce back and forth with that. I think that's an amazing question because it enters a lot of spaces that I would love to talk about today and bring an additional highlight on something Suzanne said that was critical. Reaching out to and electing the right representative. That's why I'm honored to be here today with Suzanne Hug. We need her voice down at the legislature, because one of the things that we're struggling with and why we're in such a critical area is because of mandates that we have about funding. And how do we get funding? Is it 180 days of seat time in a classroom and we devote and teachers do everything they can do with that student for 180 days? And then that summer, or even before that semester is over, that student takes even an extracurricular class as a charter school, and then the public schools actually loses a huge portion of that funding despite living up to servicing that student for 180 days. So the 180 days, where did that come from? That came from our state legislators. And the educators didn't have any role in it. They voted on it, and we've been going forth with that ever since. And unfortunately, we have representatives and even senators who they had an incentive, a cash incentive, a livelihood incentive, over millions of dollars incentives that they're personally earning by creating an opportunity for charter schools and online schools that are not connected to our traditional public schools to get them funding in a way that actually takes money away from public schools. So hence we have to, it's desperately needing that we have common sense when it comes to funding our schools and making sure we put our teachers in our public schools in a space to get the funding and retain the funding. Because imagine working 180 days for this funding and you're finally like, yes, this is how much money we have to spend, to only 4 months later to have a third of that money siphoned off by someone who didn't spend a third of that time you spent educating that student. So hence, from there, I want to throw it back over to Suzanne, but that's why we need new representation. And we have to, especially, and I don't mind saying it, replace our current leader down at the Senate, Rusty Bottles. We have to elect Suzanne. We need a voice of somebody who wants a thriving public education and wants the dollars to be not only restored, to be whole, but actually go back to the money that's actually owed to our school districts. Right now, if we had a third of the money that was owed to this public school districts here in Arizona, we would just have so much money that I think every student would have had laptops 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So we're still fighting for funding that we had in the 80s. Right now, Arizona, with its expansive growth, it still has not reached, not percentage-wise, but dollar-wise, the same amount of funding we had in 1989.
Yeah. Thank you, Kiana. You know, there are so many skills that I'm watching my kids learn right now from working remotely. They're learning how to do a Google slide presentation. And I'll tell you, that's a real life skill, right? You might be using that in work. I know I'm using it in marketing and communicating and other things. So I think Stephanie's question is great, talking about what parts of this technology are we going to keep? And it's a really good discussion we need to be having. You know, sometimes I watch the congressional hearings at the national level, and they're amusing but sad, because what we see is that we have people asking questions of tech giants, people who are really controlling the way our society communicates right now, and they have no idea how any of that technology works. Like, just, it's really, really clear. And I hate to say it, but we've got that at our state level too. It's not about a person's age, and I want to make this very clear. It's not about a person's age. It's about their ability to use the current technology, to understand it, and to implement it. Right? I know people who are in their 80s who have a computer and they use it and they're fine. My dad texts with me all the time. He turned 80 earlier this year. right? So it's not about the age, but it is about the ability to face our current situation and to plan for the future. And I think we should keep teaching kids digital tools, even when we're able to be back in classrooms. I do think we will have more students who will choose to be virtual or digital going forward because they find that, you know what, there's not the distraction of the classroom. And maybe they like having time to work on their projects a little bit at their own pace. And that really, if it's bringing more variety and individualized learning, I'm for that. And it's something that works for people, and we have the funding and the supplies to make it happen. So I would like to see, just like, you know, how there are a lot of people who are working from home now and they're going to stay remote. I would like to see that as an option going forward for our kids. Now, obviously, there's a lot of logistics. So this is just my preferences. There's a lot of hard work that needs to be done, processes, learnings, teamwork, you know, behind it. But I think that in order to be globally competitive, because right now we're not just competing with the person who lives down the street.
Right.
We're not just competing even with the person who's in the US for these jobs. And I want to make sure that we can all have good, thriving livelihoods, that we need to be globally competitive, and our kids are going to need these skills. And if it means that we're getting laptops into the hands of kids where this is the first computer in their house, I see that as a net positive. And learning something new is hard, and this is not the ideal situation to do it, but maybe we're helping some parents gain some skills too. And that going forward, it's really going to be something we look back at and say, wow, that was tough, but we got so much better because of it.
As Mesa, those of you who are Mesa residents, I would implore you to raise your voice. One of the things that I'm really excited about that this brings to the forefront is our ability that we have not tapped into. I would like to see Mesa become the first Wi-Fi accessible city. We are buying hotspots here and there and trying to do a fix that if we collectively became a city that was a Wi-Fi accessible city, so this is one of the appeals I have to our city council, and that's where you use your voice. I don't necessarily just go there as a Mesa School Board member. Our city council members know me because I was showing up way back when I worked downtown for the state. One of the first things that I noticed is now the 535 bus route is that we had overcrowding down at the Superstition Springs Mall when it came to getting on the bus. So I was down there saying, hey, we need a new bus route. Guess what? We have it. 2 of our city council members rode with me on the bus. I was like, yeah, this is a need. We see it. And it was studied and kind of vetted out in less than a month. They went for it. And now we have that bus that runs from Mesa, goes to the Gilbert Park and Ride and go downtown. So your voice matters. And as women, your voice matters even more so because we vote more. We vote larger and we're consistent in what we do. So I say, rise up, raise your voice. This opportunity is the right time to seize it. Mesa, I say forward with Mesa. We're bringing ASU and its innovation. What is innovation? A Wi-Fi city, and that is a game changer because students who've had problems with connectivity and accessibility and all of these things, there's some zip codes where Wi-Fi, you can't even get it in the area or get your modem in that particular place because of what the construction is like. So, but if we were a total Wi-Fi city, that barrier would be eliminated. So that's my call today. That's one of my asks today, because I'm sure I'll have a few, but that's the opportunity and the difference. So when you decided to invest that time, I want to leave you with things that we can tangibly walk away from and do. It doesn't take a lot. And I'm going to say one other thing about city council. A lot of things that are pushed down from the legislature go straight to the city council. So we actually need Suzanne in that seat to carry the right messages when it comes to education. So when it comes to our city council, we can implement those things that we want to see from Mesa Public Schools.
Thank you, Kiana. I want to take this moment before Suzanne replies and we move to more questions, just to give a shout out to Kiana Sears and all the people who are representing us, like reasonable, science-based people who care, people who are struggling but are patient, and the work that you do in the board. Like last Wednesday when I watched the whole meeting and then I fell asleep and then I watched the last 20 minutes the next morning. And the first thing was like, hey, nobody told me that school boards stay awake so late, right? So it's just like physical labor, just staying there, continuing with the conversation, and the work that you do, the role that you played in that meeting. I really want to thank you for that. Like really, for me, for my kids that you know, and thank you. And I agree. We need to know what each office does, right? To know exactly what is the flow of the money. Suzanne always says that, follow the money. Where does the money come from? And that is where the decisions are made. So I have a comment here that it's from Sandy. It says, not a question unless you want to address it. And I think it's directed to Suzanne, and I would like Suzanne to jump in and then Kiana to round it on the information that you have on the ground. When you're in office, Suzanne, she says, I hope you'll address the disparity between how we fund through tax credits on state taxes, public schools at a lower level than private schools and organizations. It seems to me very unfair, inequitable, and we should be encouraging support for our public schools. So Suzanne, how do you understand this problem as, you know, from your perspective, from your economy perspective, and what are you planning to address? And Kiana, how would this look like in the ground? So Suzanne?
So Sandy, you're right. It is. Thank you for bringing it up. But the way we fund our public schools right now is unfair. And that's why we owe our public schools so much money. I mean, Kiana referenced to it. If we were just paying them what we actually owed, they'd be in a much better place. But the budgets aren't doing that. So I mean, that's my number one. Right? We need to get this COVID crisis under control. We need to get our economy back on track. And a big way of doing that is to invest and actually pay the money to the schools that we owe, because those schools are the heart of our community, right? It's a place where kids are getting fed. It's a source of a lot of jobs in our economy. And it's where people can learn skills, especially at our community college level, that they're going to need, because some of the jobs that have gone away aren't going to come back. We're going to need to help our community members transition into new jobs that are going to come forward and find other ways to earn a living. Because the last thing I want to see is our homelessness rate to increase. The last thing I want to see is our poverty to increase. And I think we have a lot of opportunity now to take charge and to shape what is the new normal going to look like? What is our future going to look like? But we're going to need to make some really big, bold, systemic changes to do that. And that's why it's so important, not just for my race, but you know, we're only 2 seats away from flipping the Arizona House and 3 seats away from flipping the Senate. And if we can do that, Arizona, for the first time in decades, will have new leadership, new people in roles who want to get voting rights, who want to get healthcare out there, who want to make sure that there's a safety net for all of our citizens. And education is one of the best places to really invest those dollars where we get a huge return as a community. So definitely changing public education funding to a way that we actually fund the schools is a big part of what I want to do. And the back end of it, it's all very technical, but it's really making sure that big corporations pay their fair share and that we're getting the money to the people who need it.
So one of the first things I want to say when Suzanne and when people talk about parity in the legislature, I want to remind everyone when it was, because I actually was a research analyst at the in the Senate when we were at that 15-15 split in the Senate, and it was a whole different environment. And so going back to 2000, 2001, and that day, the thing that sticks with me and why I won't forget any of it, Rusty Bowers was still there. And I remember I was actually a much younger person going to Arizona State University to earn my degree. So hence thinking about watching my daughters at the time who were underfoot, who are now grown and have graduated from college, and he's still there, very much outdated and just passe and should be of a different time and not serving us now when we need 21st century solutions to educational funding. So living on in part of the Great Divide, and when I talk about the Great Divide, that's what our school district has. We have an east side and a west side when it comes to funding, with a lot of Title I schools existing on the west side because of how funding shows up. So when I start looking at our A+ schools, I will tell you that funding and the love and the hard work and dedication of our educators and our classified staff and support staff doesn't necessarily equate, because you have some schools may not get the best grades, but you can be an A+ school and not have top funding because people work so hard and work overtime and give that 80 hours plus. I didn't say 60, I didn't say 40. I said 80 hours plus, so hence having my greatest respect. But the funding problem goes back to who gets to profit off of education. That's supposed to be public education. When I look at the pizza, when I look at the funding as a pizza, one of the biggest problems is a lot of time in education, we're fighting for a larger slice of the personal pan pizza, when it actually should be an extra large pizza here in Arizona. Where our money comes from and from the legislature should be a huger base where we can actually get funding from. Because one thing that happens when people are conservative, they say, hey, but you're already getting a large piece of our little personal pizza. No, the loopholes that has kept people from actually investing into the whole pot is what the biggest problem is. We have corporations that are paying dollars of tax money, dollars, not $20, not $30, not one. I'm not talking about a percentage, but I'm talking about dollars, because there's been tax loopholes created and tax abatements created that has siphoned off billions of dollars that should be in our general fund, leaving us the opportunity to get a slice of a huge pizza. We are how many times larger than Rhode Island? And our state budget is the size of Rhode Island? This doesn't make any sense at all. We have cities bigger than that state, and we're still dealing with a budget that should be equivalent to that of one of our largest cities, i.e. the city of Phoenix. So I say to you, that's where it's critical that we get legislators who say, hey, these loopholes and these things that go on for years and years where they never promise, where they never fulfill the promises that they made of jobs and bringing to our cities a thriving economy and giving something back, is where we need to stand up and say no more, not on our watch, where we allow all of the things that should support our schools and build our schools to be taken away because we are favoring corporate entities. So that's one of my biggest pet peeves when I actually look at the fight of education. It's we have money. The money, when you look at it holistically, could appear to be a big number, but when you actually look at the per pupil spending in Arizona, we fight for the bottom. Since in the last 10 years, we've gone from 48 to 49 to 48 to 49, not ever getting up as high as 45, which is ridiculous when you look at the talent we have in Arizona, imported and currently implanted. This doesn't make any sense. And when you look at the bottom line, it's exactly that, Suzanne, watching the flow of money and watching the bottom line and watching where all of this money is leaking out of our system because it's benefiting huge corporate entities. We're not talking about mom and pops because mom and pops are struggling. And I want to actually give a kudos to mom and pops because for our school district, we actually thrive with our clubs, our organizations, and the things that enrich children's lives are all on the back of mom and pop businesses. They support our T-ball. They support all of the things that children are doing that's extracurricular. So I want to thank small business owners, one of which Suzanne Hug is one. So those companies are what keep us in the game and keep our children's lives thriving. So hence, I would be remiss to not thank them. But when it comes to the giants that I think that are robbing our future generations and our school districts, that's where we need our people in our legislature to step up and say, no more robbing our public schools on my watch.
Thank you, Kiana. Thank you, Suzanne. That's powerful. So powerful. So it's time to wrap up our conversation. No rush, but I would like to ask a last question to both Suzanne and Kiana to wrap up the conversation. And that is, you're both running. So Kiana Maria Sears is running to be re-elected for the Mesa Public Schools School Board. Suzanne Hug is running for the Arizona House, LD 25. She's the only Democrat running. So when you vote for her, please vote only for her. Post it. And people watching on Facebook and people watching here on Zoom, why should that vote for you? Why are you the candidate who focuses on education?
Thank you so much, Tanya. You know, I really believe in balance in life, in all things. And I think we deserve a balanced representation. This area in Mesa, my neighbors and myself have had 2 GOP representatives for as long as I can remember. And I really believe it's time to bring back balance because all of the independents in my area, all of the Democrats in my area deserve a voice, deserve a representative who will listen to them, who will meet with them, and who will represent their issues. And I know one of our biggest concerns as a community is education, is our school system. Because if our schools aren't thriving and safe, our communities are not thriving and safe. We are so interconnected. We are so dependent on each other. And it's something too where it can also lift us up. Strong schools will help us. You know, we see businesses growing and thriving near universities and campuses and school districts that are strong and growing and thriving. And it's been too long. It's too long that we have been fighting for a piece of that tiny pie. So that's why I'm running, is to bring better growth, bring better change, to make it our government better and more responsive, to treat you like a customer, not just every 2 years, but every day. So my name is Suzanne Hug. I am running for the Arizona State House in Legislative District 25, and I ask for your help, I ask for your support, and I ask for your vote. So please visit my website at hugforhouse.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at hugmesaaz. But we have volunteer opportunities because voting this year is critical. But to get a win, voting is not enough. We also need donations and support and volunteers. And I really appreciate you spending the time with us today to talk about and to think about and to really ponder these questions, because we need to take the time to think and not just react. We need to plan, or else we're going to be failing. And we can do so much better.
Thank you, Suzanne. And of course, again, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share this time and this platform. When I think about why vote for me, why I'm running, why I continue to run, why I do what I do, I remember that my family, we had a discussion about my work ethic and what I put into everything that I do. I'm a very hard worker because I believe to whom much is given, much is required. And as someone who's benefited greatly from having both of my daughters go through the Mesa public school system, I know what it's like to have services and also have to advocate for services because you may not have the right insight. And I devoted myself to make sure that we do our best to serve all families and all children and make education and all of the incredible opportunities accessible for all children. Because what I saw, what I received was incredible. And I'm very proud of public education and what it can be, what it should be, and what we're calling it to be. So hence, lending my hands, my time, my dedication to running for Mesa Public Schools is why I do this. I also know that representation is very important. And people say, well, are you saying that we have to have Black people and that's why we need to have them represented? No, it's a perspective. I remember sitting in a board meeting and we had a family who had one of the worst days of their lives. Their child was hit by a car. And someone talked about the neglect of the parent. And the thing that came to my mind right away was the parent was working. That's why the child was a latchkey child, not neglect. Neglect was the last thing that was going on with that parent who has to work 2 part-time jobs to get food on the table. So a perspective. I remember at that moment, my perspective in having a single mom and being a latchkey kid that I had in the context that neglect wasn't part of the equation again, but a parent who was doing everything they could possibly do and then still had to make a decision that cost them everything they lived and worked for. That's a reality when we look at our impoverished communities, that parents are making very hard choices every day. And we need people on our school boards and in the legislature who have not only the empathy, but the insight of all people, all perspectives, and haven't lived in an ivory tower or haven't been privileged, so privileged that they are insulated to the struggles that are really happening in our community every day. That's why I run. That's why I ask you for your vote and why I ask you for your support. And it's Sears, the number 4, MPS, Mesa Public Schools. Because as long as I have the time, the availability, I don't have to work 2 jobs because I also work in education, so I'm aware of the pay and what happens. Sometimes you have to go the extra when you choose this lane, which is unfortunate. And that's the other struggle and why I get in this struggle, the respect and honor of the profession should show up in paychecks. So I am very aware of what that looks like. So that's why I run. So I encourage you to go through my website, which is searsformps.com, and do volunteer. Give me your support. I work 9 to 5 every day, but I find the time, I find the energy because I really care about my community. I love Mesa, and most of all, I love people, and I love our future leaders. I love when I see that student come back after graduation and give me the idea of what their future looks like and what the opportunities are and what they're doing. And I was like, wow, if I was doing that at 14, 15, 16, 18, where would I be today? And I was like, probably Mark Kelly, an astronaut. But, you know, hence opportunity, because we all can be. It's not that out of this world. So thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you, Kiana. Thank you, everybody. So I posted both Kiana Maria Sears and Suzanne Hug's pages. If you can, please donate to the campaign. Every dollar counts because it turns into phone calls, into text messages to reach out to the community. And if you can't give, that's fine. If you have 2 hours a week, join our team. We're making calls. Yes, texting is fun. We do have text banks and we are making calls. That's what we need to do right now. So sign up. There's links on the chat, both on Zoom and on Facebook. And there are a few questions, very specific questions on the Facebook page. Both Suzanne and Kiana will go there and reply to you directly. Kiana, especially for you because they're very specific. You might have that information. And thank you everybody for being here. Suzanne, the floor is yours to wrap up the town hall. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Kiana, so much for your time, your dedication, your patience, your resiliency, for being who you are, and for representing and protecting so many voices. So many voices. You know, we need more people like you in this fight. So I'm proud to support you in your run for school board. And, you know, let me know anytime I can do something. But I love having these conversations, and this is something too that as an elected official I would want to do regularly for you, is to have these town halls, to be accessible, to let you know what my thought process is, what my sources are, and to be transparent and accountable. Transparency and accountability. I mean, that's who I am as a candidate. And as a mom, you know, I'm a practical problem solver, just like Kiana. I think that's something, one of the reasons that we get along so well, is that we say, you know, it's not about blaming people. It's not about, you know, getting mad. It's about getting serious and taking care of business. That's who we are. It's what we do. And it's why we want to have a seat at the table. So thank you all for your time today. Take care, be safe, wear a mask. We'll get through this together.
Thank you for your vote.